Welcome to the Still Curtain Podcast. It's Monday, September 30th, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3-1 after falling to the Indianapolis Colts 27-24 in Week 4 of the 2024 NFL season at Lucas Oil Stadium. I'm Josh Yourish, and today I'm going to react to the news that right guard James Daniels is out for the season with a torn Achilles, and I'll be joined by Derrick Bell of SteelersNow to break down the Steelers' loss in Indy and a couple players who have jumped out because he's a great film guy, one of the best breaking down the Steelers. So we'll look at some of the people that are popping on the All-22. But first, I have to talk about Mike Tomlin. If your $138 million defense can't win if it doesn't just maul the opposing offensive line and you have no other answers, you probably shouldn't be spending that money on that defense because the offense could use some help. The defense was not good on Sunday, and it started really, really flat. This was another classic Mike Tomlin loss. And we've gotten familiar with the Mike Tomlin losses in the last 17 years. There are really two genres of them, and I actually think that we saw both of these Mike Tomlin losses on Sunday. A Tomlin loss can mean a couple of things. Usually, the definition is the Steelers go on the road as a favorite and lay an absolute egg with a lifeless effort and get upset. Think losing to Terrell Pryor in Oakland in 2013, or maybe the Arizona game that was at home, but last year 24-10 to a 2-10 team with a chance to get to 8-5. But there's another type of Tomlin game, Tomlin loss. In this one, Tomlin is completely overmatched by the opposing play caller to the point that his vaunted defense cannot get off the field on third down. Think anytime the Steelers played the Brady Patriots and linebackers were just constantly chasing wide open wide receivers. We got both of those. And it wasn't Tom Brady on the other side. It was Anthony Richardson and then Joe Flacco. We got both of those on Sunday. And it was not pretty. The Steelers sleptwalked into this game. The Colts opened it with an 8-play touchdown drive. Marched right down the field. Started with a 42-yard Richardson pass right over the outstretched arms of Joey Porter Jr., who was awful. Then a Steelers 8-play drive that led to a punt. It would have been a 3-and-out without a bad roughing the passer call. Colts 9-play touchdown drive. Steelers 4-play turnover on downs. Colts field goal 17-0. Just like that. Then the Steelers 3-and-out. Colts went 3-and-out. Defense finally bowed up a little bit against Joe Flacco. Then a 9-play drive down 17-0. And George Pickens fumbles right near the goal line. Colts punt, and the Steelers play for a field goal at the end of the half and go in 17-3. It was a disaster. It was a lifeless effort. The offense was not good. And we'll talk about Justin Fields. We have to talk about Justin Fields. But the defense was the story, and the defense really was, in a lot of ways, a disaster. This is just another classic Tomlin loss. Steichen outcoached him in every single phase. And let's get into that, right? We got into the lifeless effort coming out completely flat. Now let's look at the completely outcoached and outschemed. The Colts had 13 passing first downs in that game. 6 of them went to Josh Downs, their slot receiver, who was excellent. He's a good player. 2 of those against Joey Porter Jr. Okay. Porter Jr. had a bad game. But if you have your best corner on their slot receiver, take that chance. 1 was against Dante Jackson. That was a really important one in the fourth quarter. Jackson just didn't make the tackle. Okay. Bad play. Jackson got cooked in the slot when he was playing the nickel. But he's still a reliable person in the secondary that you're going to trust. And then you have one of Josh Downs' 6 receiving first downs against Nick Herbig, 1 against Patrick Queen, and 1 against Peyton Wilson. That's just Steichen out-coaching and outmaneuvering this Pittsburgh defense. Out-coaching Tomlin, outmaneuvering this Pittsburgh defense. Michael Pittman had 5 of those 13 receiving first downs for the Colts. 3 against Joey Porter Jr. Again, Porter Jr. was awful. 1 against Minka and 1 against Landon Roberts. You're ending up with a Landon Roberts on their number 1 receiver. This is the stuff that happens in these Mike Tomlin games. They don't just come out flat. They were completely out-coached, out-schemed the entire way in this one. Josh Downs was great. He had 9 targets, 3 for 3 for 49 yards, and 3 first downs versus Steelers linebackers. Joey Porter Jr., as I mentioned, he was targeted 7 times, 5 catches, 81 yards. All 5 of them went for first downs. He allowed a touchdown and only had 1 pass breakup. The Steelers just couldn't dominate in the trenches. And that's what this defense is built to do. It's built to get pressure, constant pressure on the quarterback, and shut down a run game. It couldn't do that. Cam Hayward was excellent. 5 pressures, 2 sacks. He dominated the game on the interior. But TJ Watt had a Myles Garrett game, if you will. 20.7% pass rush win rate per PFF, 2 pressures and no sacks. So for all the Steelers fans that say Myles Garrett's completely overrated because he doesn't actually finish those plays off, well, that was TJ Watt on Sunday. And it's a good Colts offensive line, but the Steelers couldn't get pressure off the edges. Nick Herbig was really bad in his starting debut with Alex Highsmith out. I love Nick Herbig. I think he's an excellent player. He was, I won't say really bad. He was just completely quiet. There was nothing in the pass rush. 20 pass rush snaps, no pressures, no sacks, had 2 tackles. This team was not ready to play on either side of the ball because the offense started terribly. But the defense, even in the second half, it wasn't getting the stops it needed to get. It couldn't get a takeaway that it needed. The Steelers should be 4-0. Not because I think this is a great team. Not because I think this is a team that's going to be a playoff winner or even a Super Bowl contender. But they've gotten great breaks against opposing quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins off an Achilles when that offense was not figured out at all and he did everything out of pistol because he couldn't move. Bo Nix in his second career start. And then Justin Herbert with a sprained ankle and then Taylor Heineke who couldn't do anything. It happened again in week 4. Anthony Richardson left the game in the first quarter. And maybe that was a bad thing because Flacco was great. Flacco went 16 for 26 for 168 and 2 touchdowns. After the game, a lot of people had this quote, but I pulled it from Jenna Harner of WPXI's Twitter. When you work all week to defend Richardson and then you get Flacco, it's a little bit different. It probably took us a little too long to adapt and adjust in some areas, said Mike Tomlin. You think? It took a really long time. Flacco has played the Steelers 22 times in his career, and every single one of them with Mike Tomlin on the sidelines. He's played the Steelers more than any other team. It probably took us a little too long to adapt and adjust in some areas. And I get that philosophically, right? You're expecting a guy who's going to take deep shots, move, run around. That's what you have to prepare for with Richardson, and you're getting something completely different in Joe Flacco. But it's not something foreign. It's something you've defended a lot. I don't take that excuse at all. And Tomlin had another one after the game. He was asked about Justin Fields' performance, and Mike DeFabo of The Athletic had this one. Quote, I appreciate his fight, but he and we were a little sloppy at times. Too sloppy to comfortably secure victory. Yes, Fields had the fumble, the botched snap on the final drive, and he took 30 sack yards. But he was also the only reason the Steelers were in this game at all. And that's without Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels in at guard and without Fautanu at tackle. Like, this is a ragtag offensive line right now and an offense that doesn't have a number 2 receiver and an offense that lost Cordero Patterson and didn't have Jaylen Warren. Justin Fields was a bit of a roller coaster ride. And yes, he was a little sloppy, but Mike Tomlin's defense was way sloppier. And Mike Tomlin's his game management was sloppy at the end of the first half. Like I said, Tomlin was entirely content to play for a field goal down 17. Be a little more aggressive. And even on the final drive of the game, right? Fields fumbles a snap. Okay, that's a disaster. That is Fields being too sloppy to comfortably secure victory. But on 3rd and 22 with 107 left, he checks it down to Najee. Najee gets 11 yards and inexplicably decides to stay in bounds and doesn't stop the clock. Tomlin clearly wanted to hold on to his final timeout for a possible game-tying field goal attempt. And I understand that, but the circumstances have changed now. You're facing 4th and 11. And Tomlin, again, took too long to adapt and adjust. And the Steelers lost the game with a timeout in their pocket. It's really hard. It's really, really hard to quantify the value of a head coach on Monday through Saturday, right? It's safe to assume that Tomlin is one of the very best on those days. But on Sundays, it's been 17 years and he's still making the same mistakes. The Steelers' offense has reached a point of critical mass of injuries. It happened in week 4. They came in banged up. It got a lot worse, and we're going to talk about that. But this loss is squarely on Mike Tomlin and his defense, a defense that needs to carry the Steelers with all of those injuries. And after that performance, I'm not so sure that it can. And that's a big problem because the Steelers should be 4-0, heading to possibly 5-0 against a really banged up Dallas team too. But now they're staring 3-2 in the face. And I'm about to get ready to welcome on Derrick Bell of SteelersNow. But before I do that, I got to tell you about how you can make the greatest time of year even better. Football is back and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. And I'm one of those this year, right? We started this partnership with Underdog. It was super easy to download, super easy to sign up. And it's really fun and engaging way to spend your Sundays with a little bit more on the line other than just your fantasy team or maybe just some bets you're making. You can take these higher or lower stats for your favorite players or your least favorite players and get into the action with Underdog Fantasy. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code STILLCURTAIN, that's STILLCURTAIN, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code STILLCURTAIN, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. And with that, Derrick Bell of SteelersNow. And Derrick, you're one of my favorite guys breaking down the film of the Steelers. I think you do an excellent job. I love your breakdowns. I'm excited to see them every Monday morning. More excited after a win than after a loss, obviously. And we had what I'm calling a classic Tomlin loss yesterday. And where I want to start is you talked all week going into this about it maybe being a bad matchup for the Steelers against the Colts. And you mentioned Shane Steichen kind of knowing where the bones are buried against the Steelers defense, right? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this with Steichen, but you just look at the last 3 matchups that he's seen the Steelers defense. Man, he's really took them to town a little bit with Philly in 2022, and then last year, he kind of took it to them. They scored 30 unanswered with the backup quarterback. No Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss got hurt early in that game, and then he was able to really do the same thing yesterday. I think it just comes down to a couple different things. Really, for one, personnel wise, the Colts do a lot of things and have a lot of options available to them that a lot of other teams don't, mainly due to the play of their offensive line, because they didn't have their center, Ryan Kelly, yesterday. But still, like, their offensive line is one of maybe like 4 or 5 in the NFL that won't be completely dominated by the Steelers front. And we saw that yesterday. Like Flacco was very rarely pressured. He had pretty much a clean pocket for the majority of the afternoon. They weren't able to generate pressure with the front four. And then after that, like really, they've been playing a lot of spot drop cover three really all season long. And you can kind of see where some of those deficiencies can crawl up if like you're not winning up front. And Steichen, he just has a really good understanding of how to attack that. And I think part of that comes from one, I think he's just one of the more creative play callers in the NFL right now. But
Mhm.
two, he goes up against Gus Bradley every day in practice. Their defensive coordinator, if you look at the top of like the cover three usage rates around the league just over the past several years, Bradley for really the entirety of his career too. Uses a lot of cover three. So like he understands how to attack the system. They see it every day in practice. And I don't know, it's just a bad matchup for them for one way or another. And, at least it's not in the division. But if, these teams start making the playoffs here in the next couple of years, both teams, kind of got some young talent that they're trying to build around. That is a little bit of a cause for concern for sure.
Do you have any other coaches or play callers that you think of? Maybe they don't come to mind right away, but that you think of as like owning the Steelers and knowing where the bones are buried against the Steelers defense as well?
I mean, I know, it's kind of hard to say play callers for sure. I mean, I know
Mhm.
everybody will point to like Brady, some of the things that like they were able to do in New England, and you actually saw some like carryover with that yesterday. Of course, most of the time when teams have your number from a defensive standpoint, it's usually quarterbacks. You get
Yeah.
these great quarterbacks. They tend to do that to pretty much everybody, right? But at the same time, New England used to do some stuff to the Steelers that we saw the Colts do yesterday. Spreading them out, using a lot of personnel groupings to get the right personnel on the field. Like for example, the Colts were able to manipulate their formations to get the Steelers in two linebacker sets or nickel, and then they were able to attack matchups with Josh Downs on the weak side. And they even did some things like playing off of that, like they got Downs as like the weak number two receiver in their empty sets, and he runs a lot of option routes from that. And like he got Peyton Wilson once, and then
Yep.
they kind of did a nice play off of that earlier in the game where they motioned him from like a quads formation and put him in the slot, and they pushed the formation over, and it's just like it's too easy of a completion. So like I said, I think it just comes down to like the Steelers kind of are a defense that wins, or at least has won, so far this season, with a very predictable kind of defensive contour. And for a play caller like Steichen, when he gets into a rhythm, like he definitely knows where to attack.
Yeah, and we obviously saw that in the matchup, and you were one of the few people that was really on it because everyone was picking the Steelers to win this one, and you had it nailed. Let's go to the other side of the ball because we have to talk about Justin Fields, and it's 20 minutes into the show, and I haven't really brought him up all that much yet. You tweeted today that it was like a classic Fields performance in terms of this is what we saw on the Bears. What have you seen from him so far this year? And then what were kind of those bad habits that cropped up yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I think just for Fields so far through the first 4 weeks of the season, I think he's given them competent quarterback play, and that was kind of what I was anticipating or slash hoping for.
Mhm.
You look at some of the numbers. I think he's 13th right now in EPA per play. He's 18th in success rate. Justin's been completely fine. Like I think he's done a better job, especially over the first 3 weeks of the season. Cutting down on the negative plays. Not taking as many sacks, not putting the ball in harm's way, and then you still have the capacity to do some pretty special things outside of the pocket with him in terms of his athleticism, his ability to, push the ball outside the numbers, throw the deep ball, and things like that. What I meant by my tweet about this felt like the most Justin Fields game of all time was just you saw pretty much everything that we've seen through stretches of his career thus far, man. Like we saw, some highs that were really special. Like I said, him making plays. I felt like he put the Superman cape on at times, like keeping the Steelers in this game, making plays out of the structure of the offense, pushing the ball down the field. We saw him be arguably the most consistent runner on the
Mhm.
team yesterday, was able to generate some yards with his legs. They get down in the low red zone. He, scrambles. The Colts did a really good job covering both those plays up with their man coverage looks, and he ends up scrambling, kind of makes the offense right. And then we saw some frustrating plays, right? Like the sack and fumble to take him out of field goal range was bad. Also, he bears a good portion of the blame for the final drive in terms of not being ready for the snap. And all that happened there. But I mean, there's a lot on the film in terms of like sometimes he's making things harder for himself than it needs to be. And then also it felt like a Chicago game where I felt like the coaching wasn't necessarily always putting him into great spots. And then the defense, was pretty much, unbearable yesterday with how bad
Yeah.
they were through certain stretches. So it was just a perfect storm of like, man, you want this kid to break through, because I mean, you see the toughness on film and like how his teammates want to fight for him. But I don't know, for one reason or another, man, I've seen at least a half dozen games just like the one we saw yesterday.
So you mentioned like the coaching staff not putting him in the exact perfect situations. And this is something everyone talked about. Like I talked about it all offseason, and it's not something that I came up with. It's not a perfect marriage. It's kind of a square
Sure.
peg round hole in the Arthur Smith offense, right? He wants long play action, hit it over the middle. That's just never been what Fields does. I was encouraged a week ago before the Indianapolis game because I felt like against the Chargers, we saw kind of a melding of, okay, Fields, you're better out of shotgun. Let's find ways to hit the middle of the field out of shotgun, right? We don't need everything out of, zone stretch runs and hard play action. They started to get a mix of it, I felt like. What have you seen in the marriage between those two? And then how did it kind of go wrong yesterday? Because obviously the run game isn't working and the play action off of that is not working. But what have you seen from them this season, yesterday, whatever you want, wherever you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just got done like going through like the all 22 of the offense for the first time just right before I jumped on here. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, key takeaways, man, just like they're not able right now and haven't been able to all season long. They haven't been able to run the ball on first down, and like that's really hurt them in terms of, not staying ahead of the sticks. They haven't been able to set up any of their play action stuff. A lot of the play action stuff that they've been trying to run over the first month of the season is stuff that I've seen Art run in years past. It's just been defenses have been doing a really good job of covering up. And then I think there's been maybe like one or two missed opportunities, whether it be, a turn down where Justin may need to let the ball rip down the field to make it to try to hit an explosive play over the top. Maybe it's, a missed blocking assignment or two that leads to a quick pressure and he can't step into the throw. Or, I think some of it too is, a lot of it just feels kind of static right now. Like some of the things that they're doing off play action, like the bootlegs and stuff have been fine. They finally got a good screen pass going yesterday with the explosive play to Najee, but they really haven't been able to use play action to open up the middle of the field. And, I think that's the thing that I've been probably most surprised by, because, Justin's not a guy that's going to attack the in between the hashes or in between the numbers
Mm-hmm.
relentlessly from the pocket. But one thing that he would show the capacity to do in Chicago is at least off play action, he would push the ball down the field. Like you go look at his ADOT off play action this year. I mean, it's historically low. I mean, they're
Yeah.
basically using play action right now to set up some checkdowns because they haven't been able to scheme anything open down the field. Even like it was frustrating yesterday, like just going through the game. The Colts play, exclusively single high cover three. The Bears got them a couple times where they would use play action. They would run like a deep over behind the linebackers to try to get them to, roll over and hit an explosive play like that. The Bears hit Odunze for a 30-yard play, and I'm like, this is definitely something they're going to try to steal. I mean,
Yeah.
every offense in the league has it in the playbook, but it's like we didn't even try to see them try to do that yesterday. And it's just some of the stuff like that is just really frustrating to me because it's like, I mean, cover three is not new, man. Like, and Gus
Yeah.
Bradley, his system hasn't necessarily evolved a ton. You know exactly what you're going to get. So I was underwhelmed by the play calling. Like I said, I don't think they necessarily set him up to succeed yesterday. I thought, there was definitely plays where he could have made something happen, but I thought him out of structure was really the best part of the offense.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And it feels like for me, the edict kind of comes from the top with Mike Tomlin that even if you get a Arthur Smith, who is one of the better play callers, or at least has been one of the better play callers, dependent on quarterback a little bit, in the league, they're still gonna be very overprotective with their quarterbacks. Is that something you feel like you've been seeing, or is it just okay? Fields is turning down some of these throws that are there.
I think it's kind of it's a little bit play by play dependent, but I
Yeah.
would say for the most part, I think the majority of the play action stuff's been well covered down the field, and I think
Mhm.
that's more of a scheme thing than anything else. And with Fields, he does have some limitations in terms of like what you can do with him as a passer and like how you construct the offense around him. But he does have some pretty special like physical gifts too, which kind of can offset some of the limitations that he has as a passer. But I don't think that they're necessarily doing a great job right now in terms of like giving him some easy buttons in the offense. Like, and I think
Yeah.
that the one thing that I was kind of hopeful for with this offense was that they were going to be more efficient off play action. They were going to be able to generate some explosives, and that just really hasn't been the case through the first month. Now, hopefully that ends up being the case as the season rolls on. You know, the offensive line gets a little bit healthier. But I would say like the two biggest issues right now that aren't like personnel related, because I know they got some backups playing up front. We all know about the receiver situation. It just is what it is. But
Yeah.
I think the two things that I'm looking for like significant improvement over the second half of the season is, early down rushing success and then some play action shot plays off of that. To try to get this thing going a little bit more, and maybe just a little bit more like play to play stability instead of just relying on, some of those out of structure things.
Let's talk about the run game then, because it just hasn't worked. And another thing where it feels a little bit like a square peg round hole with Najee Harris in kind of an outside zone system. But yesterday, that wasn't even really the case. Like, if you look at the splits, it was more gap running and stuff that Najee has done well with historically. Injuries are obviously a big reason because this offensive line just isn't healthy. And you said, like, hopefully it does get more healthy. In some cases, it just can't with
Right.
James Daniels and Falatanu. What would you diagnose as the issues in the run game? Because it just hasn't worked.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like I said, I think a lot of it goes down to personnel, right? Like, right now, like Spencer Anderson is not really like a playable guard in the league.
Yeah.
Like he's just not ready. And I don't know how else to like really put that. I mean, the film is the film. It's been really like tough sledding for him, and I think he's gotten thrust into a role that he's not necessarily ready for. And I think a lot of the pushback and these were things that I kind of questioned about the hire. Are the Steelers going to be? Will they lean into some of this like puller stuff, the gap stuff, the power? Will they lean into like an expansive quarterback run game? And I'm not saying that like Art isn't to blame at all for some of the shortcomings in the run game, but like I do think that it's unfair to like just characterize their struggles on him solely because he has tried to do more things with like pullers and things like that. We saw it even yesterday. They
Yeah.
just aren't winning enough at the point of attack, and some of that is just because they've got too many negative players playing on the offensive line right now that are really hurting them. And then I also think like with the outside zone or with really any zone blocking scheme, offensive line is a lot about like chemistry. Like, and you
Mhm.
see it, like you saw it a lot versus Denver, but it's about chemistry, like knowing when to come off of doubles, like who you're working to, things like that. Like when you're rotating guards in beside a rookie center, like it's really tough. You can't develop that rapport with guys, and then you're rotating right tackles. Now we got Broderick Jones in there. It's just tough to really get a rhythm, and I think it can get better because I don't want to underestimate just how big of a upgrade it'll be to get Isaac Seumalo back, but
Yeah.
like you mentioned, I mean, no James Daniels for the rest of the season. That's obviously a huge blow. I know the team really likes Mason McCormick. We'll see what it looks like. I thought he was fine yesterday. He was a little bit up and down, like you'd expect for a day 3 rookie getting his first start against a good player in Grover Stewart. But it has, in order for the Steelers to get where they want to go, which is like in the playoffs and actually compete once they get there, they're going
Yeah.
to need this offensive line and this run game to be a lot better than what they've been over the first month.
So we've been a bit negative, and that is usually my tendency on here. Through the first 4 weeks, at least it has been. Even through a 3-1 start, I've been a bit pessimistic about this team because, like you said, that bigger picture of can you win a playoff game? Beating Bo Nix isn't going to show me that you can. Um, let's get maybe a little bit more positive because I asked you to put together a list of 3, 4, 5 players that have really popped when you watch the film. Because, like we said, and you mentioned, like you're digging into this stuff better than most people are. Who are some of the Steelers that have really jumped out to you through the first 4 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, Zach Frazier would be one. I think anytime, even before the season, I wrote an article for Steelers Now, just like talking about the outlook for rookie season expectations for their class, and I remember writing and saying this multiple times, that I thought Frazier was the most NFL ready guy that
Yeah.
they had in this class. And I think all of that stuff's really translated. Just the grip strength, like his ability to play with good leverage consistently. I think he's maybe even been a little bit better of an athlete on film than I was anticipating versus a jump up in competition. I think he's been reliable in pass pro. Just very technically sound too, in terms of like hand placement, hat placement, all those things, and just making all the calls at the line of scrimmage. Now, some of the snap issues and just different things that they're still working through. I think, those are worth noting. But like when a rookie comes in and plays along the offensive line at like a good level, like not just for a rookie, but like a
Yeah.
legitimately good level, I think it's worth noting. And Frazier's going to be a good player for a really long time here, I feel like. In terms of other players that I've been really impressed with, I think Darnell Washington has been somebody that I've really liked.
He had
He's
the
getting a
big
lot.
catch yesterday.
Yeah, he's getting a lot more playing time, man. Like obviously Smith's system is really multi-tight end oriented. But the things that Washington can do for you is really unique. They can put him in really difficult pass pro assignments. Like he's already had a really good one-on-one reps against guys like Matthew Judon, John Franklin Myers. That you don't like other NFL coordinators don't have that luxury. And then
Yeah.
along with some of the things, I think as a run blocker, I think even coming out of Georgia, Darnell was more of like an idea than he was an actual player, because like some of the really highlight worthy blocks were him getting out on these smaller defensive backs. It's like, that's really cool, but like, what can you actually do in line? And you saw like in line, like he would have good moments, but then like the hand placement would be off and he'd just be kind of bear hugging guys. And his rookie season was a little bit uneven in that regard, but I think like this year he's been better with that, just in terms of like getting his hands tightened inside and then moving people off the line of scrimmage. And then like, we've seen him be a little bit more involved as a receiver. He had the
Yeah.
back shoulder touchdown against, Denver, and then the spectacular play yesterday against the Colts. So he would be another guy that I would say. And then kind of my last one would be Deshaun Elliott. Like I've been really, really impressed with Deshaun Elliott. When they did that deal with him in free agency, it was kind of like post Patrick Queen signing. They just got
Mhm.
Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. So it was like, it was not really talked about a ton. And even when I went back and watched this film, I was like, this dude's really solid. Like he's going to be assignment sound. He's a really good tackler. He's probably not going to make a ton of splash plays, but he's going to know where to be, and he's going to be able to free up Minka to go back to playing, Minka ball in the middle of the field. And he's done all of that and then some. Like he's been spectacular, man. Like he made a couple one-on-one tackles on Jonathan Taylor yesterday in space that were incredible. He's made plays in the backfield. He forced a fumble on Anthony Richardson. Unfortunately, they couldn't recover it. But yeah, I've been really thrilled with like how he's played, and I think he's honestly like a really good value signing for what they were able to do in free agency.
Yeah, I love that list. And Darnell Washington, like you said, he was kind of an idea coming out, but an exciting idea, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
at that size. I was drunk at a bar, still finishing up college when I saw that they drafted him, and I hastily bet the Steelers to win the Super Bowl because I was just excited about that draft, right? It was obviously money down the drain, but that was the level of excitement that you could have for. It was also that draft class, like Benton
Sure.
and Herbig, but I'm excited to see that there's anything for him in the pass game, because I didn't think that was going to be the case. Like when I watched him in camp, and I wasn't there every day, it just didn't look functional as a receiver. He didn't look smooth out there. He didn't look athletic in space. He's
Sure.
obviously a valuable blocker. And, somebody like Mercedes Lewis is still in the NFL because an end line tight end who can actually be an impactful blocker in the running game is valuable. But seeing that there's something there from him in the pass game is really exciting. Speaking to Elliott, I was excited to get Minka back off the line of scrimmage, right? Everyone was. Okay, this is what he does best. Obviously, there was the bullshit flag yesterday on the the 15-yard penalty. What have you seen from Minka back there? Because the splash plays haven't been there. But when you're watching the TV copy, like he's off the screen most of the time. So what have you seen from Minka back in his more comfortable role?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, I think that Minka's been perfectly fine. Like you said, the safety position, a lot of what they ask him to do in the post is really just keep a lid on the explosive plays.
Mhm,
And quarterbacks are afraid to throw in like between the numbers when he's back there. Like there are certain ways that other teams get attacked in between the numbers that the Steelers don't because they have 39 in the middle in the post. I think he's made some good plays. Like his best plays of the season have really been in some of their cover three, like strong rotation with him like buzzing down to like the hook. They like
mhm.
to do that on third downs. He's made a couple really nice stops in space where he's like tackled the ball carrier short of the line to gain. Yesterday, I thought that he could have had an interception. I'll probably end up tweeting the play out, but Flacco like threw one in his vicinity, and I really think that if that play gets replayed 10 times, I bet Minka probably breaks it up at least 7. Like, I think that was a really tight window throw, and it's one that I'm used to probably seeing him at least get a hand on.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see the all 22 copy because I haven't seen it. But watching live, and then I went back and watched the TV copy when I got home last night.
Mhm.
Um, but I think he's been fine. I think turnover production can really be, it can be finicky, man. Like it comes and goes. Like sometimes interceptions fall in your lap, and then sometimes you're right place, right time, and whatever. Like that's just how sometimes how the defensive back position goes a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And these insights have been awesome. I think you're one of the best breaking this stuff down. I'll be
Thank you.
following everything, and I hope everyone does. Make sure to plug everything for us. Thanks for coming on, and you can read his stuff at Steelers Now. Let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and everything, because you're one of the best doing it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me on. Always good to talk ball. Really, any platform I get to ramble about my thoughts is always fun. So
Well,
appreciate
you
you.
have one here. You have one here. We're happy to have you on.
I appreciate that, man. It's at Steelers_DB on Twitter and on YouTube. And like you said, all my written work can be found at SteelersNow.com.
Thanks for coming on, Derrick.
Appreciate it, man.
And we still got a little bit more before we're finished up here. I got to go into Justin Fields a little bit as well, because we obviously talked about it with Derrick and he broke it down and was excellent doing that. More than what we've seen from him through the first 4 weeks, let's take an eye forward to what we're going to see from him in his new reality, because believe it or not, Justin Fields is back on the Bears. That's just what the situation is at this point. Fields failed in Chicago because of some of his weaknesses in his game, and he's not a complete passer. He doesn't access all the levels of the field right there. There are legitimate flaws to his game. But one of the huge reasons that he failed in Chicago and they moved on from him was that he had a bad defense, a poor offensive line, and no weapons at receiver. So it was on him to make everything right and win every game. Fields didn't and couldn't play within himself and his limitations, and it led to huge mistakes because he was just trying to make up for the deficiencies on his roster. We saw that on Sunday, and in a lot of ways, we're going to see that going forward. The defense is not going to be as bad as it was against Steichen, against the Colts. Steichen seems to have his number, and have his number being Mike Tomlin's and this Pittsburgh defense. And it's not always going to be that way. The Steelers have a good defense. It will be one of the best in the league. But this offense is falling apart at the seams. Offensive line injuries. We got to get into them. James Daniels, it was reported he's out for the season with a torn Achilles. That's a huge blow. He's probably been, Zach Frazier's the most exciting offensive lineman. Daniels has probably been the best this year and certainly the most reliable. He has not missed like any time since signing here as a free agent, and he's heading into free agency after this injury after the season. Fautanu is out for the regular season as well. Nate Herbig, out for the regular season. He'd be a big help at guard, right? We're hearing that Spencer Anderson is not playable. That's what Derrick said. That's what we've seen, right? Herbig would be in that spot. It wouldn't have been Spencer Anderson if Herbig hadn't gotten hurt. They had a contingency plan, and it fell through because he got injured. That happens, but it continues to happen, and it's just unfortunate. It's not that they didn't prepare for this. Seumalo is out and he's getting close to coming back. That'll be a massive upgrade when it's Seumalo and McCormick alongside Frazier in the interior. But we're not sure that's going to be this week, and it won't plug everything up. Dylan Cook, also a Liz Frank injury, less important, but it could get important, right? Because 5 of the Steelers' top 10 offensive linemen coming into the year are hurt. 3 of them are out for the season. That's really hard to overcome. It's the only unit on this roster that theoretically could survive that type of cataclysm, right? Because they've drafted back-to-back first-round offensive tackles. They still have Dan Moore in place, and he's been okay. They have Seumalo. They have Daniels at guard. They paid for both of them, right? They have invested in this offensive line. So that's why it's even remotely functional, and it barely is. Playing behind that offensive line, Fields still managed to go 22 for 34 for 312 and a touchdown with 55 yards rushing. He led the team in rushing with 55 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 10 carries. He's making it work. At least on Sunday, he made it work. But we'll see how long he can, how long he can hold off from making those big mistakes that really cost the Steelers. And hopefully he will and can, because there have been exciting flashes from Justin Fields. But the situation that he's in now in Pittsburgh is just about as dysfunctional as the situation was in Chicago, right? The Bears had to trade out of the number 1 overall pick to give it to Carolina. One of the things they wanted back, other than just the pick that became Caleb Williams, was DJ Moore, because they desperately needed help at wide receiver. And even with just DJ Moore, they didn't have a reliable number 2. The Steelers don't have a reliable number 2. Pickens yesterday, 7 catches for 113 yards. He had the drop in the end zone. He had the fumble. He was still clearly their best receiver, and he's been very good this year, even with all the attention that defenses are giving him. Freiermuth had his first touchdown in a long time, 5 catches for 57 yards. He's super reliable over the middle, and Fields is starting to really trust him and look his way more and more and more often. But beyond that, that's kind of it, right? Your other receivers of note, the only 2 other receivers, wide receivers that actually made catches were Jefferson, 2 for 21, and Calvin Austin, 1 catch for 17 yards. They just aren't reliable targets to run out there for 30, 40 snaps a game. But the Steelers have to. And imagine if they get an injury on the outside. I mean, they already have one, right? Roman Wilson didn't get a hat again on Sunday. He was an important draft pick, the third round pick in this draft class of the Steelers. Somebody they were counting on to be reliable out of the slot, right? Maybe to develop into a dynamic threat at number 2 receiver. And we haven't seen him. Tomlin has to go to him, right? Because he is healthy now. But I understand the setback that a preseason injury can be for a young receiver. And I understand why the Steelers are reluctant to trot him out there until you really, really need to. And at 3-0, I guess you can argue you don't really need to. At Dallas, against Dallas, obviously, next week at home, I'd love to see Roman Wilson get a helmet. It's time. It's time to start integrating him, because there's no juice on this offense otherwise. So maybe he can provide a spark. But even then, it's not a great situation for Fields to thrive in the backfield. It's a problem too. Jaylen Warren was out with an injury. Clearly, he was nagged by an injury before. This one took him out. He's been a non-factor this season. Cordero Patterson looked like the best running back on Sunday, and then he went out with an ankle injury. The Steelers are down to the worst of their 3 running backs. Najee Harris, people don't love to hear that, but Najee Harris is not a reliable option in the run game, and this offensive line is not good, but other running backs have made it work, right? Cordero Patterson has made it work. I talked with Derrick about Najee not being a fit for this zone run scheme. Yesterday, that wasn't the reason he didn't have success, right? The Steelers had 14 gap scheme runs to 9 zone scheme runs against Indianapolis. They were a gap team on offense yesterday. 6 zone runs for Harris, 7 gap runs, right? Gap runs, obviously, like more of a power game with pulling guards and pulling tackles. That's what the Steelers traditionally do. Arthur Smith traditionally does the zone stuff. They're going back to some of the power stuff because they need to. They need to get Najee Harris going because his run game is not effective. And still, Najee finished with 19 yards on 13 carries. He averaged 1.5 yards per carry, while Patterson, behind the same offensive line, averaged 7.2 with 43 yards on 6 attempts. 2 of those zone scheme, 4 of those gap schemes. So it's not even that Patterson is just a better fit for the offense Arthur Smith is running, and that's why he brought him here from Atlanta. No, it's just he's probably a more dynamic running back. And if you want to make an excuse for Najee Harris, I'll even hear it, right? He came into the facility on Monday wearing a sling. He has a shoulder or an elbow. It's a little bit murky, but he's dealing with an injury. He's not at 100% right now. Even at 100%, I think he's probably their third best running back, second or third best running back, but banged up. He's borderline unplayable, and they have to play him damn near every snap because otherwise you have to put Aaron Shamklin in because this team just isn't healthy right now. If we look ahead to week 5, the Steelers are 2.5-point favorites at home for Sunday Night Football versus the 2-2 Cowboys. That's not going to be an easy one for the Steelers to win, and the Cowboys have not looked good. Dallas is likely without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. They have an awful, awful run defense, but the Steelers aren't a team that can take advantage of that. So it's going to be on Justin Fields to carry the offense, and it's going to be on the defense to help out Justin Fields and make it so he has to score 17, 18, 20 points instead of 24 or 28 he would have needed to beat the Colts yesterday. That's too much to ask of this offense and too much to ask of a quarterback who is still developing. So everything turns to Mike Tomlin and this defense, and it has to be better next week. The Steelers went from feeling good about maybe a 5 or 6-0 start, right? We talked about it last week. Maybe this win streak can keep going, and they need to keep stacking these wins because the back half of their schedule is really tough and looks even tougher now that Washington and Jaden Daniels is maybe the best offense in the NFL. So you got to stack wins. You need this one on Sunday Night Football. Don't feel great about it because they could potentially be looking at 3-2, a 3-2 start, maybe even fall to 3-3. You have the Jets coming up, right? This went from, okay, you can stack these wins and ensure you're a playoff team going into the back half of the schedule, to it could get ugly with these injuries if the defense isn't completely dominant. It wasn't on Sunday. That loss is on Tomlin's shoulders. But the long-term pessimism, that's all about the injuries. And those aren't going to get better. So Tomlin's defense really needs to. That's going to do it for the show today. A huge thank you to Derrick Bell for hopping on with me. Check all of his work out on SteelersNow and find him on Twitter. His breakdowns are excellent. It was a lot of fun having him hop on. And until next week, go Steelers.